Here is a story where you wonder, why do we even get married? After 10 years of marriage, I discovered that my wife had been living two completely different lives, and it made me question whether marriage was ever worth the risk. My wife worked as a leasing agent for a large apartment complex, a job that required her to show units and handle tenant issues throughout the day. Her position provided regular interaction with many different people and gave her scheduling flexibility that I never questioned. We had one child together, a 6-year-old son who was the center of our world and the reason I worked so hard to provide a stable home. The first sign of trouble appeared when my wife developed what she described as a hobby of visiting the riverboat casino with a male friend from her past. She explained that this friend had recently moved back to town and was going through some personal difficulties that required emotional support. Their casino trips began as occasional outings, but gradually evolved into regular weekly events that sometimes extended late into the evening. My wife would return home with stories about small wins and losses, always claiming that they were being responsible with money and just having harmless fun. She insisted that her male friend was simply someone who needed companionship during a difficult transition period in his life. I never met this friend and rarely asked detailed questions about him because I trusted my wife's judgment about her social activities. However, the gambling began creating serious financial problems that became impossible to ignore despite my wife's reassurances about being careful. Credit card balances began to climb rapidly, and our savings account was depleted to cover expenses that I initially couldn't identify or understand. When I questioned my wife about this, she would become angry and promise to make amends to pay off the debt. The debt grew so severe that I was forced to take a second job in the evenings to keep up with our monthly obligations. I began working part-time at a local restaurant after my regular job, trying desperately to prevent our family from falling into bankruptcy. The stress of working two jobs while helping raise our son was exhausting, but I believed we were facing a temporary crisis that would eventually resolve itself. My wife promised repeatedly that she would reduce her casino visits and focus on paying off the debt we had accumulated. Despite her assurances, the gambling continued, and our financial situation kept deteriorating as she spent more time away from home. She became increasingly secretive about her activities and would often turn off her phone during times when I needed to reach her. The breaking point came when I decided to examine our phone bill online, hoping to find ways to reduce our monthly expenses. What I discovered was shocking. Over 10,000 text messages between my wife and various phone numbers. I couldn't believe it. Who in the hell was she sending 10,000 text messages to? Many of these messages were sent and received during overnight hours when she was supposedly sleeping beside me in our bed. To me, that volume of communication was staggering, with constant exchanges that continued throughout the day and night for weeks at a time. I realized I needed concrete evidence before confronting my wife about what appeared to be inappropriate relationships with multiple people. After researching surveillance options online, I purchased 2 small voice-activated recording devices that could operate undetected for extended periods. I carefully placed one recorder in my wife's car and another in our house, where I knew she would take calls when I wasn't home. These devices would provide definitive proof of whether my suspicions about infidelity were justified or if I was misinterpreting innocent activities. The opportunity to test my surveillance system came when I had to work an extra shift covering for a colleague who called in sick. This meant I needed our babysitter to watch our 6-year-old son for several hours while my wife was at work. We used this babysitter sparingly, only when necessary, but she was reliable, and our son was comfortable with her. When I returned home and reviewed the recordings from the house, I heard something that shattered my remaining faith in the people around me. The babysitter had received a phone call during which she casually mentioned that she knew my wife was cheating on me. According to the conversation I overheard, the babysitter's mother had specifically instructed her not to say anything about what she knew. The casual way the babysitter discussed my wife's infidelity suggested that it was common knowledge among people in our community. This revelation broke my heart because it meant that others were aware of my humiliation while I remained completely oblivious to the truth. As I continued listening to the recorded conversations from both devices, I began to understand the full scope of my wife's deception. The evidence revealed that she was involved with her ex-boyfriend from high school, someone she had reconnected with during her casino visits. This man had recently moved back to our area to help his father run the family real estate business, providing him with both time and money to pursue my wife. I had never known about this ex-boyfriend because I had never asked my wife about her past relationships in any detail. Their affair had been facilitated by her gambling activities, giving them regular opportunities to meet without arousing my suspicion. The recordings confirmed that their relationship had progressed far beyond casual friendship into a full-blown romantic affair that had been ongoing for months. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my wife, and the people in our lives had been built on lies and deception. The recordings from my wife's car provided even more devastating details about the scope of her betrayal and the elaborate planning that went into hiding it from me. Over several days of listening to captured conversations, I learned that her ex-boyfriend owned expensive cars and took her to upscale restaurants that I could never afford on my insurance salary. He was funding their affair with money from his father's successful real estate company, treating my wife to luxuries that made our modest lifestyle seem pathetic by comparison. The voice recordings revealed that they had been intimate on multiple occasions, using his apartment above the real estate office as their primary meeting location. My wife would tell me she was working late, showing units to potential tenants, when she was actually spending hours in bed with another man. The most painful revelation came when I heard her describing to him how boring and predictable our marriage had become over the years. She complained about my lack of ambition, my appearance, and even intimate details about our relationship that should have remained private between spouses. According to her conversations with him, I was nothing more than a reliable provider who paid the bills while she pursued excitement with someone more successful. Her gambling addiction had provided the perfect cover story, allowing her to disappear for hours while claiming she was at the casino with a friend. The recordings confirmed that she had been losing significant amounts of money gambling, but her real motivation for these trips was meeting her lover. Her ex-boyfriend would often meet her at the casino, and they would leave together for romantic dinners or trips to his apartment. The financial crisis that had forced me to take a second job was directly caused by her reckless gambling and her need to maintain an expensive lifestyle with another man. She had been borrowing money from credit cards to fund her gambling losses while spending cash from her lover on personal items that never appeared in our household. This dual financial drain explained why our debt had spiraled out of control, despite my efforts to work additional hours and cut our expenses. The voice recordings also revealed that several people in our social circle were aware of the affair, but had chosen to keep quiet rather than inform me. The babysitter's mother was just one of many adults who had decided that my humiliation was not their responsibility to address. My wife had apparently been careless about hiding her activities, assuming that I was too trusting or too stupid to notice the obvious signs. Her ex-boyfriend had even joked during one recorded conversation about how easy this was because I never asked challenging questions. They both found my trusting nature amusing rather than admirable, treating my devotion to our marriage as a weakness to be exploited. The recordings from different dates showed that their affair had been escalating in intensity and frequency over the past 6 months. What had started as occasional meetings had evolved into a serious relationship where they discussed future plans that did not include me or my son. Her ex-boyfriend had suggested that she should divorce me and move in with him, offering to support her financially while she transitioned to a new life. My wife had expressed concern about custody issues and financial obligations, but she was considering ending our marriage for this other relationship. The most devastating recording captured a conversation where she admitted that she had never really loved me and had only married me because I seemed like a safe and stable choice. According to her own words, she had settled for security rather than passion, and now regretted wasting 10 years of her life with someone beneath her standards. Her ex-boyfriend represented everything she felt was missing from our marriage: excitement, financial success, and the social status that came with dating a successful businessman. She described me to him as a placeholder husband who had served his purpose, but was no longer needed now that she had found someone better. The casual cruelty of her words was almost unbearable to hear, especially knowing that I had been working 2 jobs to support the lifestyle she was secretly funding with another man's money. After listening to hours of recorded conversations, I realized that confronting her would be pointless because she had already made her choice about our future. The woman I had loved and trusted for 10 years had been planning to abandon our family for months while pretending to be a devoted wife and mother. My son would grow up in a broken home because his mother valued her happiness more than his stability and well-being. The institution of marriage had provided her with financial security and social respectability while she pursued her real desires with someone else. Everything I had sacrificed for our family meant nothing to someone who viewed marriage as a convenience rather than a sacred commitment. Armed with undeniable evidence of my wife's betrayal, I faced the most difficult choice of my adult life: whether to confront her immediately or plan a strategic exit from our marriage. The recordings had provided me with leverage that most betrayed spouses never possess, giving me the power to control how and when our relationship would end. I could expose her affair to her family, her employer, and our mutual friends, destroying the reputation she had worked so hard to maintain in our community. Alternatively, I could use the evidence to secure a favorable divorce settlement and custody arrangement without dragging our son through a public scandal. The more I considered my options, the more I realized that confronting her would only allow her to manipulate the situation and potentially destroy the evidence I had gathered. She had already proven herself to be an accomplished liar who could twist any situation to her advantage, and I had no desire to engage in emotional warfare that would benefit no one. My primary concern was protecting my son from the trauma of witnessing his parents destroy each other through bitter accusations and legal battles. He deserved better than to become a pawn in his mother's selfish games, or to suffer because she had chosen temporary excitement over family stability. The recordings had revealed that my wife was already planning to leave our marriage, so confronting her would simply accelerate a process she had already set in motion. Rather than giving her the satisfaction of playing the victim in a dramatic confrontation, I decided to take control of the narrative and file for divorce on my own terms. I contacted a family law attorney the following morning and scheduled an emergency consultation to discuss my legal options and the strength of my evidence. The lawyer was impressed by the quality and quantity of documentation I had gathered, confirming that my wife would have little room to contest a divorce or custody arrangement. Her recorded admissions about the affair, combined with evidence of her financial irresponsibility and gambling addiction, would make her an unsympathetic defendant in court. The attorney advised me to secure copies of all financial records and to document any assets that my wife might attempt to hide or liquidate before the divorce proceedings began. I spent the next week quietly gathering bank statements, credit card bills, insurance policies, and other documents. My wife remained oblivious to my activities, continuing her affair while assuming that I was too naive or too weak to discover her deception. She maintained her regular routine of casino visits and late-night work emergencies, never suspecting that her every conversation was being recorded and analyzed. The voice recordings from that week captured her making concrete plans to move in with her ex-boyfriend within the next 2 months, confirming that my marriage was effectively over. She discussed quitting her job at the apartment complex and relying on her lover's financial support while pursuing a more glamorous lifestyle that our modest income could never provide. Her casual dismissal of our son's emotional needs during this transition revealed the depth of her selfishness and her unfitness as a primary parent. She seemed to view our child as an inconvenience that would complicate her new relationship rather than as a vulnerable person who deserves stability and love. The recordings also captured conversations about her gambling debts, which were significantly larger than I had originally suspected, and included money borrowed from dangerous sources. Her ex-boyfriend had been helping her pay off some of these debts, but he was growing frustrated with her continued losses and had threatened to stop enabling her addiction. This financial pressure was apparently one of the factors motivating her to leave our marriage quickly before her gambling problems could destroy her new relationship as well. I realized that my wife was trapped in a cycle of addiction and deception that would eventually consume any relationship she entered, regardless of how much money her partners possessed. Her ex-boyfriend was simply the next victim in a pattern of behavior that would continue until she faced serious consequences for her choices. By the end of that week, I had made peace with the end of our marriage and felt relieved rather than devastated about our impending separation. The woman I had fallen head over heels for 10 years earlier had either never existed or had been gradually replaced by someone I could no longer recognize or respect. My son would be better off with a father who could provide stability and honesty, rather than parents who are locked in a toxic relationship built on lies. The institution of marriage had failed to protect our family from my wife's selfish desires, proving that legal commitment means nothing without moral character and genuine love. As I prepared to file the divorce papers, I wondered how many other men were working multiple jobs to support their wives, and in the same situation I was in. About a year after filing for divorce, the legal proceedings had concluded with results that exceeded even my attorney's predictions. My wife's recorded confessions about her affair and gambling addiction had made it impossible for her lawyer to mount any meaningful defense against my claims. The court awarded me primary custody of our son, with my wife receiving only supervised visitation rights due to her demonstrated financial irresponsibility and emotional instability. Her gambling debts had grown even larger during the divorce proceedings, forcing her to declare bankruptcy and lose any claim to our marital assets. The judge had been particularly unsympathetic to her situation after hearing excerpts from the voice recordings where she described our son as an obstacle to her happiness. My ex-wife was required to pay child support despite her precarious financial situation, though I doubted she would ever be able to meet those obligations consistently. Her relationship with her ex-boyfriend had imploded when he discovered the true extent of her gambling debts and her willingness to lie about anything that suited her purposes. He had thrown her out of his apartment after she stole money from his wallet to fund another casino visit, leaving her dependent on reluctant family members. The real estate business that had seemed so glamorous to her AP wanted nothing to do with someone whose personal scandals had become public knowledge throughout our community. My ex-wife was now working at another apartment for minimum wage. She won't be living a luxurious lifestyle on that. Her gambling addiction had only worsened after our separation, as she desperately tried to win enough money to restore her previous standard of living. Meanwhile, my son and I had built a routine that provided him with the security and consistency his mother had never been able to offer. Without the drain of her gambling losses and expensive tastes, our household budget was actually healthier than it had been during our marriage. I was able to quit my second job and focus on being a present father while building my business into a more profitable enterprise. The relief of no longer living with deception and manipulation had improved every aspect of my life, from my health to my professional relationships. My son had initially missed his mother, but he had quickly adapted to the peace of our new living arrangement. He no longer had to witness arguments about money or wonder why his mother seemed more interested in her phone than in spending time with him. The divorce had taught me valuable lessons about the risks of marriage that I wished I had understood 10 years earlier. Legal commitment cannot create genuine love, loyalty, or moral character in someone who lacks those fundamental qualities. Marriage had provided my ex-wife with financial security and social respectability, while she pursued relationships that satisfied her true desires. A marriage license is ultimately just a piece of paper that offers no real protection against betrayal, addiction, or abandonment by someone with selfish motivations. The men who had warned me about the dangers of marriage had been right, though I had been too naive and optimistic to listen to their advice. But I knew other husbands were currently working multiple jobs to support wives who were secretly planning to leave them for the same damn reason. How many children would grow up in broken homes because their mothers valued personal gratification over family stability and commitment? The divorce statistics that show over half of marriages ending in failure suddenly made perfect sense when viewed through the lens of my own experience. Marriage asks people to make promises about feelings and behaviors that may change dramatically over time, creating unrealistic expectations that often lead to disappointment. The financial and legal entanglements of marriage can trap people in unhappy relationships or create devastating consequences when those relationships inevitably fail. My story serves as a cautionary tale about the risks of trusting someone with your financial security, emotional well-being, and the welfare of your children. Would I ever consider remarrying after witnessing firsthand how easily vows can be broken and trust can be betrayed? The answer is absolutely not, because I now understand that marriage offers all of the risks of a serious relationship with none of the flexibility to exit cleanly when problems arise. My son will grow up with a father who learned these lessons the hard way, and hopefully he will make better choices about relationships than his parents did. Stories like mine should make any rational person question whether marriage is worth the enormous risk it creates for minimal benefits that can be achieved through other means. I am not saying marriage is terrible, but after watching my marriage crumble and seeing so much on social media, why would anyone consider marriage? Anyway, enough rambling. I just wanted to share my story. Well, another story where a man discovers his wife is cheating, but decides to delay confrontation, which ultimately works out in his favor. But not every story will end like this. Not everyone will be able to control their emotions. Remember, control your anger and avoid making hasty decisions. Being emotional and angry will prevent you from making logical and sound decisions. Until next time.